Afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kelly Wood. I'm the Charitable Gift Advisor from the Catholic Foundation. Father, thank you so much for inviting us back to your parish to do a second workshop for you. Just raise a hand. Who was here for the last workshop that we did? I saw some familiar faces. Wonderful. Thank you and welcome back. I'm glad to see you here. Today's workshop is titled Preparing for End of Life. We have an exciting agenda this morning because we have three gentlemen that will be speaking to you. First, Deacon Henry, and he will be addressing how preparing for end of life in the Catholic lens, how we see it, what are some of the rules, the guidelines, and that type of information. And then we will have Mr. Ralph Verling. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly.
Close enough, Verling.
Yes, you're the funeral director for the parish. We'll take a little bit of time to just give a general overview on what he does for the parish. And then we will then turn the program over to Dr. Joe Thornton, who it says he's semi-retired, but I've heard a lot of people when they say I'm semi-retired work probably more than they do full-time job.
That's like sort of pregnant.
Sort of pregnant, yes. There is no sooner. But he is semi-retired psychiatrist who specializes in issues dealing with the elderly. So we have a very interesting presentation today for you. I'm very excited how it's all come together. We want to make sure that each speaker has their time up here to talk with you, so I'm going to ask you to hold your questions until the end, and then we'll do like a panel discussion, question and answers. So feel free to use one of your pieces of paper and the folders that you picked up to write your questions down, and we'll handle all of those at the end. If you did not sign in yet, I please ask you if you will sign in for me so we know that you are here. And one last thing from my request is towards the end, I'll hand out a survey, and the foundation greatly appreciates it if you will fill it out because it helps us prepare and present the workshops the parishes actually really want to hear. So at this time, I'm going to turn the podium over to Deacon Henry. Thank you.
And for an opening prayer, do I really need this? Let me. For an opening prayer, when you get the handout, there'll be some scripture in there. We have a closing prayer on the front sheet, but some scripture on the second page, which we will look at.
I'll share with you. You're always sharing.
Does everybody have a handout now? Here.
Okay, let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus says, "Stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake, and would have not let his house be broken into. Therefore, you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." In Luke's Gospel, our Lord tells us, "But know this, if the master of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have left his house to be broken into. You must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." In John's Gospel, Jesus says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be. You know, a workshop on the end of life, I subtitled it as a thief in the night, right? And I think the central question that these scripture passages that we read are asking us is, are you ready? This is about being ready. I'll tell you a little story. I remember many years ago, before I was ordained, but still studying for the diaconate, there was a man in our parish, had a magnificent career, doing very, very well professionally. He had a beautiful family, a wife and 2 daughters. And at a young age, he was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. And we watched him deteriorate from a young, vibrant, energetic man to, in the end, just before his passing, somebody who had to be pushed around in a wheelchair. And I remember when he did finally pass away, I was already thinking, how would I preach at a funeral like this? And I said to the pastor at the time, boy, this is going to be a tough one to preach, isn't it? And this guy, God rest his soul, this guy he was the type that always had these one-line shutter-uppers. He looked at me and said, nah, it'll be easy. And I said, easy? How could you say this is going to be easy? This young man leaves behind his beautiful family. And he looked at me and he saw my astonishment and he said 3 simple words. He looked at me and said, he was ready. That's all. He was ready. He said, you're going to find that the difficult funerals to preach at are for those who are not ready. So, over and over, we just got through Advent. Prepare. Be ready. Of our speakers today, let me tell you, yes, I've done plenty of graduate study in theology. Not moral theology, though. It's all biblical theology. There was a required course in moral theology, which I took and did well in, Lately, I've been leaning toward pastoral theology, so I am not, what I'm saying is, I am not a moral theologian. But I know enough theology to be able to guide you to what the church teaches, about what the church says about end-of-life issues. And as I say in here somewhere, a lot of these end-of-life issues are very complex and subtle, So we need to know resources. Right? We need to be able to go to people who we know and trust that could help and guide us through difficult decisions. That's why I asked Dr. Joe Thornton here, MD, if he could be with us, because if anybody has a question that is of a medical nature, like, for example, brain death or persistent vegetated states, I'm going to defer to Dr. Thornton, because I don't want to even answer. What I have done is mostly taken the resources that you have in your handout from 2 places. First and foremost is from the Diocese of St. Augustine, from the Office of Human Life and Dignity. Okay? Plenty of information there. A lot of the information in your handout came in part from there, especially toward the end, about the living will and so forth. All of that, the living will and the advanced directives and so forth, are things that are posted on the diocese website. And I figured, for me to be safe, I'm going to stick with what the diocese says, right, and not take a chance. But there's another excellent, excellent resource, and that is the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Solidly Catholic, extremely informative. I have called them on past occasions when I am faced with somebody asks me something and I'm not quite sure how to answer them on, the complexities of the moral theology. I get a call back from the president of the association. They're very responsive, so I would also, you have their website there as well, on the bottom of page 2. So you see you have the website for the diocese, the Office of Human Life and Dignity. That's Maureen Shelkunis that heads that office. And then below that, you have the website for the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Their mission statement, so to speak, on their website, you have there and this is going to be our solid foundation. Whatever we do, wherever we go, whatever we think is going to be based on the fact that every human life, from conception to natural death, is sacred and a gift from God. As the fundamental principle of human rights, the right to life is the priority. Number one, numero uno, right, is the priority for all Catholics, but especially Catholics are to actively work toward cultivating a world that respects the dignity of the human person in all stages. Right? That means, we tend to focus our attention, rightly so, on the unborn, right? That is the preeminent issue facing the world today, is how cavalierly we will murder an unborn child in the womb. But also the end of life, because all of us, every one of us, from the moment we were conceived in our mother's womb, we've been on a journey to death. Right? We are all going to die one day, and life is important at every stage. I think Dr. Seuss said it perfectly, right? A person is a person no matter how small, okay? I could amend that, no matter how old. So the Diocese of St. Augustine affirms the intrinsic value of human life and dignity. In so doing, the diocese seeks to provide educational resources and advocacy to mobilize the local Catholic community, that's us, in the celebration of the gift of human life and witness to the gospel of life. Okay? So, again, I mentioned it was here somewhere, and here it is. Many issues that we face here. We all would love to live in a crystal clear black and white world. That's this or it's this. That's not reality. Right? Reality is not black and white. And as I say, many issues faced with dealing with end-of-life issues are complex and they're subtle. And when in doubt, one should contact a Catholic moral theologian. I'm not such a moral theologian, but the diocese does have moral theologians. If you and we could never necessarily focus. I mean, everybody might have a different situation, so we can't necessarily focus. We're going to try to be general here. If you have a specific question, Kelly could assist you with finding a resource in the diocese. We do have an excellent moral theologian in our diocese, a Father Chua. PhD in moral theology, right? That would be able to give rock-solid, positive Catholic answers, so they could assist. Maybe we should start with, I have had parishioners, maybe, a little bit older than me. That's hard to be, because I'm getting there too. But good people. I see them at Mass every Sunday. As a matter of fact, I see them very often at daily Mass, when I'm at daily Mass. And I remember very vividly, not too long ago, one of them came to me and said, if I'm ever given one of these devastating diagnoses, I don't care, I'm ending my life. I'm not going to go through all that suffering. You mean all that you've worked for. What did Jesus say? He who perseveres to the end will be saved. You've persevered all these years. Now at the very end, you're going to take the cross that you've been handed and say, I'm going to throw it down. I don't want it. So You see item C there on the top of page 3, that is euthanasia. In other words, another term for that is physician-assisted suicide. Never, never, never. Right? Is there any question about what never means? Never means never. There was once a talk I attended by a good moral theologian who has since passed away, blanking his name now, but he noticed, he picked up a modern dictionary once, and he looked up what they put in as a definition for euthanasia. And the definition given was a medical procedure used for an incurable patient. Think about that. A medical procedure for an incurable patient. In other words, to end their life. Never, never, never. What is the Catechism of the Catholic Church? That's always a good go-to resource. Paragraph 2277. Whatever its motives and means. In other words, by motives, they mean a lot of times people call euthanasia mercy killing. Right? It's not mercy. It's not mercy. Right? Direct euthanasia consists in putting an end to the lives of the handicapped, sick, or dying persons. It is morally unacceptable. I'll read just the bold part there. At the bottom of that paragraph. It is a murderous act which must always be forbidden and excluded. So in other words, when a person, we could look at levels of culpability for sin here. Euthanasia is always, always, always gravely sinful. And anyone who assists anyone, and it's not just the suicide of the dying person, anyone who assists in that suicide, as they say, for whatever reason or motive, commits grave sin. You are jeopardizing your eternal salvation. Euthanasia is never, never, never. Yes. There is a directive from the Ethical and Religious Directives for Catholic Healthcare Services. It's a book. And paragraph 60 says, Catholic healthcare institutions may never condone or participate in euthanasia or assisted suicide in any way. Okay? So, I think enough said there. Right? It is not an option for anybody. You have a crucifix here, right? There's probably a crucifix in here. What? In the kitchen, okay. Well, next time you look at a crucifix, he had an option. He was God. He could have said, okay, no, I'm not going to go through this. But yet, what did he say? If this cup can pass, he didn't want to suffer and die. But if it can pass, so be it. But not my will, but yours be done. That's got to be our position. Right? We have been handed a cross. And as someone once said, the cross you are handed would not be the one you would have asked for. Right? You wouldn't want that cross. But when it comes, we must persevere to the end. He who perseveres to the end will be saved. Another big question that arises is food and water. And the executive answer there, the simple answer there, is food and water, basic nutrition and hydration, can never be denied. Okay? Now, we will look at this here. It may come to the point where the patient can't receive food and water. The dying process has begun. Okay? But if someone is in a coma or unconscious, they have to be fed, even by artificial means. Being unconscious has never been the cause of death. Right? You don't die from unconsciousness. You don't die from being in a coma. Other things cause death. Right? So, we get to the point where the body will simply no longer accept food, even though we try. But if the body can accept food and water, it is absolutely required by the mercy of God that we provide that. So the default position for the care of those who are suffering from diminished consciousness and have not begun the death process. You see how this gets medical so easy here, which is why I want Dr. Thornton here with us. When does that actually begin? When does the death process actually start? You might take 10 different doctors and get 10 different answers for when death has started. You need a good, solid Catholic doctor to be able, and that's why Dr. Thornton is here, who are suffering from this, or when has not begun the death process, as well as for those at the end of life, should be in favor of providing food and water, even if by artificial means. You cannot deny food and water. The bold down there. In principle, there is an obligation to provide patients with food and water, including medically assisted nutrition and hydration for those who cannot take food orally. Okay? And that is from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. That is the teaching of the Catholic Church. They're the ones who produced this document that I refer to, Ethical and Religious Directives for Catholic Healthcare Services. Okay? I think one of the biggest issues we have, not just in this, but in general, is confronting the culture. We no longer live in Christendom. Right? Christendom has come to an end. Where when I grew up as a child, everybody that I knew, everybody in my circle of friends, my family, we're all Catholic. We all believe the same thing. Oh, there might be some cranky uncle or something but we all agreed that what the church said is what we believe and what we do. We don't live in that world anymore. We have left the era of Christendom, and we have entered a new apostolic age. We have entered an age where, like the first Christians, like the apostles and their successors, we have to boldly go and proclaim the gospel of Christ, which is also the gospel of life, to a hostile world who doesn't want to hear it. They don't want to hear about it. And it might mean persecution on our part. It might mean suffering on our part. We can't throw that cross down either. Okay? Addressing the culture. What I have bolded there, whenever a recommendation is made to withhold food and water, one should ask, what will be the cause of death? If the answer is hydration and or starvation, and assisted nutrition and hydration can be easily supplied and assimilated, then not supplying them is a form of euthanasia. And what did we just say? When can we accept euthanasia? Never. Never, never, never. Okay? So denying someone food and water is determined by the church to be a form of euthanasia. If it's going to bring on their death. If you're going to starve them to death, or I guess we could go a lot longer without food than we can without water. Right? Without water, life doesn't last very long at all. But it goes on to say that if death is imminent, the provision of assisted nutrition and hydration is not necessary. So again, you see, that's a very medical decision. And I'm not an MD. I'm a PhD, but I'm not an MD. You need to seek the advice of medical professionals who you can trust on these issues. I think those are the two issues that come to most people's minds. And I know our time is limited here, and we have other speakers that are going to speak, and it's already 1:30. I wanted to say a few words about cremation as well, because we're also here to talk about the funeral and what happens after life has ended and so forth. Again, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, that should be your go-to resource for answering questions, right? You may not find every answer in there, but very often you will find the answer you're looking for. If you don't find the answer in the Catechism, you got to press onward. You got to look a little more deeply or seek more qualified professional advice. What does the Catechism, paragraph 2301 say? It says the Church permits cremation, so it's permitted, provided that it does not demonstrate a denial of faith in the resurrection of the body. Okay? That's how all this got started historically, right? There were people who denied, every Sunday we profess in the Nicene Creed, I believe in the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. There are people that don't believe that, especially in this culture. They think that's nonsense. And they're going to say, to show you that there's no such thing as a resurrection from the dead, I'm going to take the ashes and scatter them. What's God going to do then? Huh? I've got them there. Like, yeah, God who made the world from nothing can't raise up a person from their ashes, But it's your attitude that's there about, denying some critical, that's a dogmatic fact of our faith. We are required to believe that on the last day, when our Lord returns, the dead will rise from the graves and be with their bodies. They'll be and the final judgment will occur. So. And the reason that, that first paragraph there, it's not bold, because of sanitation concerns in some areas. Remember, church teachings have to be universal. Not just for the United States, where we have money and we have land and we have all these nice, comfortable things, but even in the poorest parts of the world, church teachings have to apply there too. And because of sanitation concerns in some areas, waning grave plots at cemeteries as populations expand, higher costs of traditional burials and so forth, the church relaxed her discipline from before 1963 of forbidding cremation, provided that the deceased loved ones and the chosen cremation, you don't deny the faith by doing that, right? So in 1969 is when that change came. But what I want to point out here, and I think this is probably going to be tough for a lot of people because it's an expensive option, the church continues to prefer the practice of burying the bodies of the deceased because this shows greater esteem toward the deceased. So, yes, cremation is okay, but it's a condescension to problems, sanitation problems, crowded cemeteries, expensive cemeteries, and so the church has allowed cremation. The church still prefers that the body be buried, and I think we'll see it's coming up here. But what many people do is have the full body present at the funeral. The body is there. There's actually distinctions in the funeral liturgy for a body present and cremated remains present. There's no such word as cremains, by the way. That's a neologism that seems to have arisen. People took too long to say cremated remains, which is the right thing, and they call them cremains. There's no such word as cremains. It's probably going to become a word at some point, because everybody uses it. So a good compromise is to have the body present for the Mass of Christian burial, and then once the Mass for Christian burial has concluded, have the body cremated. Okay? That is, to be brutally honest, that's the right way to do that. Right? What you can't do, you see there, it is not permitted to scatter the ashes of the faithful departed in the air, on the land, at sea, or in some other way, nor may they be preserved in mementos, pieces of jewelry, or other objects. I have presided at funerals, not in, guys, they haven't darkened the door of a church forever, but then when they die, we need to have a church, funeral service. So it's over at the Alachua Women's Club or something like that, and they say, could you come? And they're handing out little necklaces and I'm just saying, it's not permitted. It's not permitted. Now, there is a slight change to that. I'm here to be honest and tell you the truth. We'll get to a little change in that has very recently happened, 1923, but we have to be very careful how we read it, okay? And we'll wait till we get there. When the deceased, no, listen to this. This is, okay? When the deceased notoriously has requested cremation and the scattering of their ashes for reasons contrary to the Christian faith, a Christian funeral must be denied to that person according to the norms of the law. Right? This is not me. This is the Catholic Church. Right? The conversation of the ashes of the departed, the conservation of the ashes of the departed in a domestic residence is not permitted. See, again, why? What is the human person? The human person is the body animated by the soul. At death, the soul leaves the body. The body can't exist without the soul. That's why it decomposes and so on. Right? But one of the fundamental beliefs of our faith is that there's still dignity because that body housed the soul. The Spirit of God lived within that person. That means even their mortal remains still have sacred value associated with them. And on the last day, that body will rise again and be reunited with the soul. And after the final judgment, be either in heaven or hell. We hope for heaven. But that gives, you see how the body gains a certain dignity that we have to treat respectfully. It's sacred. The body is sacred. It's not something to be thrown away, discarded with. Okay? When, for legitimate motives, cremation of the body has been chosen, the ashes of the faithful must be laid to rest in a sacred place. That is, in a cemetery, or in certain cases, in a church or an area which has been set aside for that purpose. Okay? So thank you, Father Sebastian, for recognizing the need here. Our nearest Catholic cemetery is where? Somewhere in Jacksonville, if not here. We're at Palatka. Okay, but that's not that close, and it's expensive. And this was Father Sebastian's mission here, to provide a cost-effective way for people to honor their deceased beloved ones with dignity and place them on sacred, consecrated grounds of a church in an affordable way. And that's what I think Ralph is going to speak of. Now, I put there very recent change. And this is me being full disclosure here. Look at the bold there. Local church officials may now permit a family to preserve in an appropriate way a minimal part of the ashes of their relative in a place of significance for the history of the deceased person. For example, in the home of a surviving loved one. My personal opinion is that this was one big mistake. Okay? Because what happens when you give somebody a fraction of an inch? What do I do next? Take it on. Right? And I spoke with Kelly about this earlier in this week. Local, as much as we love Father Sebastian, he's not the local church official. Local church official means the bishop. Right? The bishop must decide, is this going to be allowed in this diocese? And Kelly, you are not aware, right, of the bishop saying it's okay to do this, which means it's not an option for us at this point. Okay. What about autopsies and organ donation? There's an easy one. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, once again, paragraph 2301. Autopsies can be morally permitted for legal inquests and scientific research. The free gift of organs after death is legitimate and can be meritorious. So not only can you do it, there are good reasons to do it. Like, to be able to give, your kidney to somebody who needs a kidney, and once you're dead, you probably don't need your kidney anymore. Right? You get to the person soon after their death. I actually wish Edmund Walden is not here, is he? No. I should have invited him because he's a doctor of pharmacy. and his area of specialty was oncology. And he saw a lot with dying patients. I really wish I had asked Edmund to be here today. Again, to what he once said, and me being brutally honest, is very often to make the dying comfortable, you could easily hasten their death. And hastening someone's death is not morally acceptable, right? The insurance companies like it. Because the less time you spend racking up the funeral bills, the hospital bills, the less they have to pay. But that's a touchy issue that, again, out of my area of expertise. Maybe Dr. Thornton knows something about this. Okay, maybe you want to. I don't know if you want to. I'll wait. I know I'm going over here. It's 1:40 already. You those who know me know how easily this happens. Okay. So we'll get back to Haven Hospice, Queen of Peace Catholic Church, or Catholic Community they like to call themselves, here in Gainesville, I put their website there, is a good resource for information on Haven Hospice. This is when the hospital said the person is dying, they need to go to hospice care, palliative care, and now what do we do? Well, Haven Hospice is promoted and even advertised on the Queen of Peace website. So there's a link there for you can go. It's a source for patients and their families and their healthcare providers to find answers to advanced illness challenges and so forth. Okay? Preparing for the funeral liturgy. Okay? I don't think, honestly, as I thought this through, we don't really have enough time today to do that. But what a lot of people like to do is plan out their entire funeral liturgy, the whole thing. What I'll offer to you is that I am more than happy to meet with you separately. We can convene another meeting here in the hall. I would suggest this is an older edition, but I would recommend this book by Father Champlin, Through Death to Life. It's available on Amazon for less than $6, but I guess tax and $2 or whatever. You have the link there, and I think Bob's going to post these slides, so you'll be able to just click on the link. And then we could do that as a separate issue. Okay? Here comes something also that's a little bit sticky. Advanced directives or living wills. Okay? Many advance directives invite patients to forego food and water provided by artificial means if the patients become mentally incapacitated. Catholics should not sign such documents. If they have signed them, they should rescind them. Okay? Now, on the diocesan website, of which you have the link to, and you have it in your handout, there are two pages. One is Understanding the Catholic Declaration of Life and Death, and all the terms there. What is an advance directive? Designation of a healthcare surrogate. What if there is no surrogate available? And on and on. It's actually a complete document, and I'm comfortable giving it to you because it's on our diocesan website. So I'm confident in the diocese. And also, there is Understanding the Catholic Declaration on Life and Death, and there is, on the last page, the living will. The living will, which basically says, I be provided care and comfort, and that my pain be relieved. No inappropriate, excessively burdensome, nor disproportionate means be used to prolong my life, that sort of thing. Nothing to be done with the intention of causing my death. And you see what's required there. The person or their designated, the person who could sign for them, a witness signature, and so forth. This could get you started. I think Dr. Thornton might be able to talk more intelligently about end-of-life directives than I can. So I think, and I probably used up my time, right? Yeah, I've used up my time. Surprise. But let me turn it over now to Dr. Thornton. And
Mayor Ralph.
You're Dr. Thornton,
Yeah.
aren't you? I didn't think you were Ralph. Dr. Thornton is again, they introduced him. He's a psychiatrist, an MD at Shands, but he's also a parishioner, an active member of this parish, Eucharistic minister, so we all know and love him.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so actually I have like two different phases of the talk. One's directed for everyone here, the other one's directed more towards us who are taking care of people who are dying from older age. And then we can have time for the Q&A. But the first part for all of us here, everyone here, really needs to have this process done or be working on it now. And I get people to help me. I have a short-term memory, so I use my hands to do this. We'll do 5 things. The first thing, and you've done some of them already, first thing you do is pray so that you can get into communion with something besides the speaker. So you want to pray. That's our thumb. Then you want to think about this process so you have the information now and we can start to think about the content. Then the bigger area, put all 3 fingers together, you need to discuss this with your family because these decisions impact your family. That's why you're doing this. And you need to have them all on board. This process that we go through for the advanced directives helps to prepare us for our own death, but we also have to prepare our loved ones because it's hard on them. It's hard on your adult children. And if you're going through this process with your parent, it's hard on you. So hopefully if you've still taken care of your parents or with them, you're able to have these conversations. If not, at least do this for your kids and your siblings. And then with your ring finger, you have to get it in writing. It's helpful to have these conversations. It's important for you and the family, but we really need to have this in writing so that it can be, there's certainty that goes there. So I'll say a little bit from the hospital perspective. The hospital are supposed to ask you, do you have advanced directives? And then it's really helpful, and the technology is we should have a copy of the advanced directive on file. We also need your healthcare surrogate, which is a little bit different from the advanced directive. An important thing in Florida to know is the Catholic advanced care directives is somewhat broad and general, which is good, because your healthcare surrogate makes the moment-to-moment decisions with the healthcare team. Will your loved one have surgery? Will your loved one have this medication? What's going to happen with your loved one? Those immediate decisions are made by your healthcare surrogate, and the advanced directive trumps the healthcare surrogate in Florida. So if you write specifically, I don't want little blue pills or whatever, that trumps whatever the healthcare surrogate says. So those are 2 important things to know. So whoever you select as the healthcare surrogate is probably the most important decision you make in this process, because you can muddle through without the advanced directives, but the advanced directives sort of support that healthcare surrogate and the doctors as they make difficult decisions. And then lastly, these need to be reviewed. April 16th is the National Healthcare Decision Day. It's right after taxes. So it's just a convenient time to review this. Put a little signature and date, say, I reviewed this and it's still current. I run across instances where we have advanced directives from 1992. I just updated mine and still talked about our little kids, and they aren't little anymore. So they need to be reviewed. So we pray, we think, we talk with our family, we get it in writing, and we review this periodically. Okay. The other important thing about getting the family involved is we like to, Jesus told us he wants us to all be one. And as parents, we want our kids to all get along. But, things happen over time and different stressors, kids are in different places. They don't always see eye to eye. And when their parents are dying, they get stressed And when people get stressed, they're not at their best. And so if you can do this ahead of time, it helps protect them, gives an opportunity to work where potential areas of conflict. So it's something you can do for your kids to do that. So that's the first talk. That's for all of us. The next part of the talk is for folks who are taking care of elderly people. I'm getting there. But these are hard things. You know, we all like to think, well, I'm going to go to bed and not wake up. That's the way most of us want to go. I'll be at home, family's home for Christmas or something like that. But it rarely happens that way. Unfortunately, because of the way our healthcare system is, we can keep people alive and functional to some degree for quite some time. But the dying process or being chronically ill, and then you get different things occur, you know, starts out with a little bit of pain here, arthritis, you get a fall, you get something, maybe you have some hypertension, a small stroke. So in geriatrics, we talk about the bits. We get a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it just starts chunking away over time. It's a gradual process. And, you know, from a family point of view, particularly if you're close to someone, see them all the time, you may not even notice this. And then the siblings come in from out of town, they go, oh, what are you doing to mom? Or, you know, what's happening here? So it's a process that occurs. And certain things happen along this process that, again, are very difficult decisions. So this is for everyone that we have to do. But the other difficult decisions as we get older and die is the guns. You know, it's hard to get control of guns on a good day. And then, you know, when I was in Tampa as chief of geriatric psychiatry, about 10% of our admissions were some person living out in the woods who was shooting at someone outside through the walls. You know, because when you get demented or delirious, you hear things, you get frightened, you get a little more paranoid, and particularly if you live out in the country, you've always had this mindset, that's the way you deal with problems. So that's catastrophic. You don't want that to happen. Fortunately, it's very rare that they shoot someone, but you just don't need to have that type of worry. The next thing that's very difficult are the car keys. You know, to get the car keys away, you know, to get them to surrender them. I've sort of traveled around a lot. I was in Pittsburgh. If you've ever lived in Pittsburgh or visited, you know it's all hilly. And it's also a very tight-knit family. So someone was born in a home when I was there in the 80s, and so they were born around 1900 in this house, and their mom died in the house, their dad died in the house, and they were going to die in that house, even though they had to go up 4 flights of stairs just to get to the first floor. You know, it just wasn't practical when you're 80 years old to get these places. So to drive in the snow or drive different places, we got guns, keys, but I got ahead of myself talking about Pittsburgh. So the car keys, you know, the decision to give up driving is very difficult. Usually people, some might say, I don't like night driving, all these nuts on the road. But it's hard to get them to give up their car. Then the other part's the finances. So if there's any assets in the family, you know, it's important to have those discussions because most people want to protect their assets, and you'll hear from the diocese how you can do that. But you're really subjected to pressures to make bad decisions. If you check your mail, or at least it seems like all the mail, it's called predatory loans. Someone sent you a check to say, oh, you got this, just sign it and put it in. And it's basically a high interest loan. I'm going through something, I'll be a disclosure, my brother's going through some dementia, and we learned that he had been sold solar panels 8 years ago as a home equity loan, and they weren't even connected to the house for power, and he's paying 30% interest on a home equity loan. You're just subjected to different financial things, and then the banks and all that. So you need to have finances in order and a power of attorney, durable power of attorney for incapacitated. The one nuance in Florida is that when you sign a durable power of attorney, it becomes immediately impactful. So my kids have durable power of attorney, so they could go empty my bank accounts tomorrow. But if I can't trust someone when I can watch them, maybe I shouldn't trust them when I'm demented. So, John's keys, finances, and then these end-of-life decisions, what the priorities are. Those are the hard parts. What your wishes are, and writing out your funeral arrangements or working with your parents on that to make the details. There should be a jump bag, folder, box, or something, so that when you or a loved one dies, people can go there, and those things are all taken care of. There's some phrase, someone helped me out, tempus fugit, memento mori. Is that it? Time flies, death is certain. So these are all important, but I'm a convert before I became Catholic. I was inspired by Albert Schweitzer, talked about eschatology, the science of end things, and basically, at least for us as Catholics, that's not the end, but the end of this life. It's a transition that we all have to go through. So those are the big things we have to do. We all have to do the first 5. And if you're taking care of, or you have a loved one who's getting older, look at those other issues. I'll leave other things for the Q&A, because as Deacon said, you can talk for hours about this.
Thank you.
Ralph, I apologize. I think I got the order wrong. You were supposed to do second, but that, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Part of my presentation you already gave.
Oh.
I won't be able to lead it. I do all feel free. Well, let's see. Let's see if you can hear me without the mic. Can you hear me okay?
Just in case.
All right, just in case. Is that fine? Everybody hear me okay? Again, my name is Ralph Bierling. I'm the sexton of the cemetery here at St. Madeleine's, and I'm also a licensed funeral director, and I'm also on the North Florida Catholic Cemetery Board. The purpose of me here today is to talk broadly about funeral services, and then also about the cemetery. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the funeral process, and the first question is, why do we have funerals? For thousands of years, funerals have been a means of expressing our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings about death of someone we love. The funeral ceremony helps us acknowledge that someone we love has died, allows us to say goodbye, provides a social support system for us and other friends and family members, allows us to contemplate the meaning of life and death, offers the continuity of hope for the living. There are 6 basic elements of the funeral. The first is the arrangement conference. While not technically part of the actual funeral process, this meeting between you and the funeral director serves as the foundation for creating a meaningful funeral. During this conference, the funeral director will gather important information about the person who died and help you make funeral choices. The visitation, sometimes called the wake, calling hours, or the viewing. The visitation is a time for the family and friends to support one another in their grief. Often the body is present in an open or unopened casket, allowing those who love the person who died to acknowledge the reality of death and to have privilege of saying goodbye. Receiving friends through a visitation activates the family support system and allows people to express their concern and love for each other. The eulogy, also called the remembrance or the homily, The eulogy acknowledges the unique difference of a person who died and affirms the significance that the life for all who shared in it. The eulogy can be delivered by a clergy person, a family member, a friend of the person who died, instead of the traditional eulogy being delivered by one third person. You can have more than one, and they could also share their memories too. The procession, also called the cortege, this is the funeral procession from the service to the graveside. It usually is led by the funeral coach or the hearse containing the casket. The procession is a symbol of mutual support and a public honoring of the death. Mourners accompany one another to the final resting place of the person who died. The committal service, whether the body be buried in a casket or the cremated body be buried in an urn, the graveside ceremony is the opportunity to say goodbye, accompany the body to its final resting place, and saying a few words brings a necessary feeling of finality to the funeral process. Families are often deeply touched by this ceremony, and its memory resonates for years to come. What happened here? The gathering. Most funerals are followed by a gathering of friends and family. This informal time allows family and friends to tell stories about the person who died, to cry, to laugh, to support one another. It is an informal time of release after the more formal elements of the funeral ceremony. The gathering is also transition, a rite of passage back to the living again. It demonstrates the continuity of life, even in the face of death. Viewing and spending time with the body is a way of honoring the transition from life to death and saying our last goodbyes. Embalming is a familiar standard part of the funerals in North America, though it is optional in most locations. Embalming body temporarily preserves the body so the family and friends have more time to gather together and visit the deceased. The casket may be open or just for the visitation, or for both the visitation and the funeral. In some cultures, however, viewing the body is considered inappropriate or is often forbidden. We would also like to address here the myth that viewing the body distorts your memory of the person who died. Some may say, well, I want to remember him the way he was. People often say that, but viewing is indeed a personal choice no one should be forced to do. However, most people who choose to spend time with the body find it an incredibly meaningful experience. They have an opportunity to see this special person one last time and truly begin to acknowledge the reality of death. Funerals are most meaningful when they are personalized. Studies show that more and more people believe this to be true. When you are planning a funeral, personalizing the ceremony should be a priority. Think about the special qualities of the person who died and what he or she meant to others. Consider his or her passions, hobbies, pastimes, likes, dislikes. How can you capture this unique life? Be creative as you can, together with your family, friends, funeral director, and person who will lead the service. Brainstorm how to honor the person who died. You can also write a personalized obituary. Some newspapers allow you to express more than the usual who, what, why, where, and when. And suggest display personal items, hobby paraphernalia on a table and visitation of the ceremony and the gathering afterwards. Have more than one person deliver a eulogy. Ask several people to share the memories and talk about different aspects of the person who died. Create a personalized program for the ceremony. You can include photos, poems, anecdotes, whatever you like. You can ask children if they would like to write a letter or draw a picture for the person who died. Their goodbyes can be placed in the casket alongside with him or her. Some caskets even contain a special drawer for letters. You could also select flowers that are meaningful to the person who died. A simple arrangement of fresh cut lilacs, for example, might be perfect. Or red, white, and blue standing casket sprays for a veteran or for a patriot. Create a funeral that captures the personality of the person who died. If he was zany, don't be afraid to use humor. If she was affectionate, have everyone hug the person next to him during the ceremony. A visitation, the ceremony, or the gathering, display photos of the person who died. Music can be played at the visitation, the communal service and gathering, as well as the funeral service itself. You could also create a personalized grave marker, include a poem, a drawing, short phrase that defines the person who passed away. Many times, the casket or urn used at the funeral can be personalized to reflect the hobbies, lifestyles, or other interests of the loved one. Caskets can be customized with special embroidery on interior fabric of the casket. Some caskets feature unique corner hardware designed to reflect the individual's interests, like golfing, gardening, fishing, or relationships like that of their mom and dad, or spirituality. Urns can be engraved with names, dates, birth, death, and other special text. Thank goodness for memory. It allows us to continue to embrace our love for the person who died, and remembering helps us to heal. Each time we conjure up a memory, we are finding a way to acknowledge the reality of death, and most importantly, stoke the fires of our love for the person. Soon after death, you will probably find yourself replaying memories of the person who died over and over again. This is normal and necessary. Allow yourself the time and space you need to remember. It is also important to share your memories with others. Talking about them help you reconcile your loss. In the months and years to come, more formal ways of remembering the person who died and honoring the life that has lived will help you and other mourners continue to help heal and live with the life its fullest. Today, the average funeral in the United States costs about $4,000. However, this figure differs based on the region of the country in which you are located. This includes the funeral home services, the casket, plus miscellaneous costs such as flowers, obituary notices, death notices, and honorariums. You could spend as much or as less as you would like, depending upon your choices. Since each funeral is unique, the cost will vary. What can your family afford to spend? Consider this before beginning to plan a funeral. Remember to account for employee benefits, life insurance, and other death benefits, cash contributions from friends and family, and especially the cost may have been prepaid as part of the budget. Planning a final tribute is both affordable and meaningful. We believe that whatever you spend to create a personalized ceremony in honor of the person who died is money well spent. A meaningful funeral is not necessarily an expensive one. Those special touches that make a funeral truly personalized, such as displaying photos of the person who died, offering opportunities for friends and family to share memories, are often free. We often say that a meaningful funeral can include a full-piece orchestra or a Mormon tabernacle choir, or a simple prayer and a song. Do what feels right for you and your family, and don't feel as if you must spend beyond your means. In recent years, millions of consumers have chosen to pre-plan their funerals. Fully 1/3 of Americans 55 and older have pre-planned or at least some part of their funerals. 84% of Americans think pre-planning is a good idea. Pre-planning can make things easier for the family members at the difficult time of death. It also allows us to express your own wishes. It can relieve loved ones of the financial burden. Much of the paperwork can be completed, and many of the expenses can be prepaid, allowing loved ones to focus on their grief and the creation of a personalized ceremony. If you're considering pre-planning, talk to a reputable professional who's experienced with funeral planning. A plan is flexible in case you want to alter plans or transfer it to another funeral home should you relocate. Also, ask about financing terms and cancellation refund policies. Finally, keep a copy of your plan in a safe place and tell a close family member or friend about the arrangements and the location of the documents. Choosing a funeral home. A funeral home and its staff play a critical role in the planning and carrying out of meaningful funeral. Their professional advice, caring compassion, attention to detail and willingness to personalize the ceremony greatly influence the funeral experience. Whether your family has chosen burial or cremation as a means for final disposition, there are about 23,000 funeral homes in the United States today. Many of them have been run by the same family for generations. Most funeral directors are active, committed members of our community. Before deciding on a funeral, call your friends, family, neighbors, clergy, or ask for recommendations. Consider the funeral home's reputation, location, facilities, cost, and above all, attitude. Try to find a truly customer-oriented funeral home that best meet your needs in creating a personalized memorial and healing funeral, creative, open to new ideas and requests. We hope you found comfort and help in this resource that we provide to our community. Truly believe that while a funeral cannot change what has happened, the death of someone precious to you, it can and will make a significant difference in how you channel your grief toward healing. Thank you for taking the time to understand and to reflect on the importance of creating meaningful funeral, not only in honor of the person who died, but in honor of the needs of those still living.
Thank you, Rob.
I'm not done. I know. I apologize. I really shouldn't have been here today. I'm fighting a cold and everything, so I apologize for coming off. Next thing I'll talk about is the Memorial Gardens. Christian burial has been an important and integral part of Catholic life. Catholic doctrines relating to death and resurrection have been reflected in the liturgy. Devotions and customs surrounding the death and burial of the faithful. The Christian response to death must stand as a symbol of Christian beliefs in the sadness of human life here and in the world to come. When possible, those who were part of the Catholic community should be buried in a Catholic cemetery. Those who've lived in Christ should be buried in Christ. This applies to cremated, catechumens, children who died before being baptized, baptized persons enrolled in non-Catholic church. The care with which we bury the dead expresses our faith in the victory over everlasting death, with our Lord Jesus Christ has won in our human nature by his own death and resurrection. We bury the dead in the sure hope of the resurrection of the body, when their mortal bodies will share fully in the glory of the risen Christ. The cremated remains of a body should be treated with the same respect given to the body from which they come. This includes the use of a worthy vessel to contain the cremated remains, the manner in which they are carried, attention to appropriate placement and transportation in the final disposition. The cremated remains should be buried in a grave or entombed in a mausoleum or columbarium. Scattering cremated remains or keeping cremated remains of the deceased are not the reverent disposition that the Church requires. Appropriate means for recording with dignity the memory of the deceased should be adopted. Use of a plaque or a stone to record the name of the deceased is recommended, which would be a grave marker or a tombstone. Show me the manner in which a nation or community cares for its dead, and I will measure with mathematical exactness the tender sympathies of its people, the respect for the law of the land, and their loyalty to high ideals. Most significant events in our lives require planning. You rarely just let them happen. The funeral helps us confirm the reality and finality of death, provides a climate for mourning and an expression of grief, allows the sorrows of one to become the sorrows of many. Is one of the few times love is given and not expected in return. As a vehicle for the community to pay its respects, encourage the affirmation of religious faith, is a celebration of life that has been lived, as well as sociological statement that death has occurred. Like other major events, funerals require planning. Today, prearranging and pre-funding one's funeral is not uncommon. Each year, more than 2 million funerals are prearranged and pre-funded for families and friends. By planning ahead, you relieve your family of a financial burden and emotional burden. Your life is remembered just as you want it. You have the peace of mind that everything is taken care of. If not you, then who? There are a number of overwhelming things to do when someone dies. Someone will have to notify the doctor, the funeral director, the cemetery, clergy, family, friends, relatives, and the employer. Someone will also have to make decisions for a funeral or cremation service, along with the payments and arrangements. How will you be remembered? Have you given any thought to the type of service you'd like to receive? Maybe you're set on a traditional funeral with a mass and burial, or perhaps you'd like to consider cremation with mass and burial. Whatever your choices, we are here to fulfill your wishes. Some of the services we offer is visitation with funeral mass and communal service, funeral mass only, memorial mass, graveside committal service in our memorial garden. After selection services, the next step in the pre-planning process is to select your merchandise. Things to consider is the burial space, cremation niche, an outer burial container, which houses the casket, cremation, urn vault, memorialization, and markers. Pre-funding provides a gift of love and peace of mind for you and those you care most about. You're able to select and purchase burial spaces for you and your loved ones at today's prices. 3 steps of peace of mind. Organize your documents, plan the funeral, decide how to pay. Thank you for putting up with me. I'm done. I could answer any questions you want about funerals or cemeteries, and I
Open the floor to any questions from the speakers.
When my mom passed away, and it's been 18 years since she's passed away, she passed away and she had cancer. She had ovarian cancer. And I remember when I would go in there and stuff, because she wasn't talking, she was not opening her eyes, and I was like trying to give her, like an ice, an ice. And I was told, well, you really shouldn't do that because her body is trying to go through the process that it goes through in order to pass away. And all you're doing by going and trying to give them liquids or something to eat is that you're just creating, it causes more pain for their intestines, because their intestines are trying to shut down, and you're giving them food is going to mess the whole process from happening. So I have a problem because they're saying, oh, well, you're not full spiritual yet. When you go to hospice, they tell you one thing, but you think something else, and then you don't know whether you did the right thing or not. But the other thing is that they were giving her, she was having convulsions because I guess her levels or whatever, I don't know if it was magnesium levels or whatever, but every time that it would happen, it was on a Sunday, and so go and order a drip, an IV drip, but it was taking a while for the IV drip to come. So every 15 minutes I was running out in the hallway for the nurse to come and give her a shot so she would stop, having convulsions. And the shots would last 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes I'm running out in the hallway like a crazy person, trying to get the nurse to come and give her another shot. And it wasn't until after she was gone and after the funeral was over that there were some remarks and things that were made that made me think, well, are they giving her like whatever? I don't know. But I was thinking that what they were giving her caused her to die faster. And of course, I know I can't be held responsible for it because I did not know. But when my dad died, just recently, and he was in a different hospice on 39th, which is, by the way, the best hospice there is. Believe me,
I have a copy right
you have to send a loved one to a hospice. That's the hospice.
That's all mine. It's all
Oh, believe me, it's the best. I've seen lots of hospices, and they're the best. Anyway, but the thought was running through my mind, because he had cancer also. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what are they giving him for pain? And is it escalating his death? And is it okay for them to be giving him stuff that's going to knock him out so that he doesn't feel anything? That's okay. Sorry.
I'm going to stand and address that, if that's okay.
Just
I'm going
copy
to
it all.
summarize what I think. You had questions about the hospice care, specifically at the VA for your mom, and then questions about hydration, nutrition, pain control, even things like water, specifically with your mom's hospice care. And how do you distinguish hastening death
Memorial Garden Park
versus
is already on the side,
supporting
but you could have
peaceful transition.
Right.
So those are the nuanced questions. So I'll try to answer from a bird's eye view. So I'm obviously Catholic physician. These are concerns for us. I'm in Catholic Medical Association. There's issues about medically assisted suicide that is proposed for legislation, and many doctors support in the state of Florida. And so there's these issues floating around, and then there's differences in hospice care where there's, we hear rumors, there's certain hospice care facilities in South Florida where the average lifespan in that hospice is less than 48 hours.
everybody should have.
And so it raises, just statistically some concerns. Sounds like your mom was in what we call in-hospital hospice. She was in the VA hospital receiving hospice care.
Taking care of it,
Which is
prearranged.
a bit of a different, you can have in-hospital hospice, you can have in-facility hospice, like an assisted living facility, or you can have at-home hospice care. So there's differences. So most of them have specialized nurses come through. Most of them have very similar processes. So just like when you go from one doctor to the next, there's variances in how they do that. Now, the other component, what I'm not hearing from you when you describe your experience with your mom, in most hospice, we would expect this, is the spiritual component. So I know at the VA, they have a Catholic chaplain, their Father Peter's there, and they normally we would have expected them to involve him to help sort of answer questions, ask questions, mediate some of that. That's the expectation. I worked at the VA as chief of mental health there for a few years. So those were our expectations. Those are, having these type of discussions would be the precautions. Now, there are differences that occur. So it's true when you go into hospice care, you're generally DNR, do not resuscitate while you're in hospice care. Sometimes they require that order before hospice will get involved. Generally, you don't have IV fluids or that because you're in hospice care because you have a terminal illness of some type. There's controversies, we'll say there's controversies. Most of the data would say for terminally ill patients, the artificial, what we call medically assisted hydration and nutrition does not significantly prolong life and doesn't improve quality of life. I have a particular issue with taking very demented patients in the hospital and putting, let's talk about hospital care when you're demented, okay? You're in the hospital late at night, you don't know where you are, you've got to get up and pee. What do? You want to get up and pee. If anyone's been in the hospital lately, do they let you get up and pee at night? No. They say stay in bed, and they stick a tube in you, okay? So if you're demented, you don't know what's going on, what do you do when someone sticks a tube on? You pull it out, or if they want to stick a needle in you, you hit them. What do they call that? They call it combative. And they call me to give them Haldol so they're not combative. And then they calm down so they can keep the tubes in. Because if you have a tube in, you want it to stay in and they don't want it taken out. So there's unintended consequences either way you go. When you try to put tubes in to people who are very, it's different, there's different matters if you're terminally ill versus simply demented. But there's things that we have to think about differently when people are impaired. So with your mom, the communications should have definitely been better. You experienced a better communications with your dad. So
the other thing was that finally the IV came, and when they gave it to her, then she calmed down and she didn't have any more convulsions from that point on.
right.
And she just eventually, her breathing got more and more shallow, and then she just stopped breathing.
Yeah.
And but I didn't know what exactly that was that they gave her, and was it something to hasten her passing away? And I did not know it, so of course,
Right.
I can't be held responsible or guilty in according to the Catholic doctrines, because they didn't know. And so I'm just asking now to make sure I know, in case anybody else in my family is in hospice, am I supposed to do something different?
No, I'm a psychiatrist. I'll give you 3 different answers for the same question. First, I'll ask, they can say, well, about double effect. Do you want to address that? Or-
Yeah, I mean, the principle of double effect says that a death of a patient may be an unintended consequence of trying to help them. The example that comes to mind, you said she had ovarian cancer. She was much younger and was pregnant. You could treat the cancer. Your goal is to eradicate the cancer. An unintended consequence is the death of the people touched. So it's very difficult, but that's not considered abortion, because your intention is not to terminate the life of the child. Your intention is to eliminate the cancer, and an unintended consequence is the death of the child. That's the first example that comes to mind.
So in my world, the pain control, if you give someone morphine, you all hear about opiate-related deaths and overdoses. That's a risk, that's a concern, but it's given for pain control and for breathing comfort. That's the intent. Now, there's a judgment, there's a medical judgment that intent that you give enough for the pain control, you look for alternatives of pain control, and so you pay attention to the dose. You just don't give them, 10 times the dose and let it go by. But that requires some attention. It's a conscious, attentive act, and that's why we expect doctors to be professional. Okay, and take into consideration the needs of the patients and the family.
Did you ever experience pressure from insurance companies to give more than you should?
No, because they're actually, compared to hospital care, if they're in hospice, the insurance companies are generally fine. That does bring up another issue I'll try to talk about in just like 1 minute. So like if you go review charts or look at charts or you hear people talk, when I write a note in the chart, 9 different people are going to read that note, and they all have a different agenda. I'm trying to communicate so I can remember what I did with the patient. I'm trying to communicate with doctors and nurses what I'm doing with the patient. But the insurance companies are reviewing it to see if the care is justified. The attorneys are reviewing it to see if I made a mistake or did something wrong. Quality care is reviewing it to see if I stayed within guidelines. So I get one note, I'm trying to address it to 6 different people. And where it gets really fouled up, so again, I usually talk about suicide, but so we're trying to do pain control, and we don't want to hasten death. And so there's a lot of attention to that. And if I'm a worried doctor, I might undertreat the pain, or if I'm worried, the guidelines say treat the pain. And someone else saying, oh, you don't want to kill them, I'm going to sue you if you kill my dad, that type of thing. So you're trying to answer all these questions with one note, and it can be challenging. The other factor is when I give them Haldol, actually the risk of dying from the Haldol is like 6 times what it is not giving them the Haldol. And yet, nobody questions that because, we're trying to provide comfort for the patient, comfort for the family, safety for the staff. And it does get complex. But that's why we want to try to think these things ahead of time, have a clear plan, clear understanding. I wish they'd had better communications with you, because that's the key, is the communications on what we're doing.
I have another question. For all people who have guns, is there any program, any resource for the families, how to address that as they progressively get more mental deterioration?
That would be, so the question I understand is for people who are losing their cognitive facilities, is there a program to help the family? There are. They're not as robust as they used to be or could be. It's very frustrating for me where we know what to do, but for a variety of reasons we don't. All's Place is here across from Santa Fe College. Alzheimer's Association, even though your loved one may not have Alzheimer's disease, the problems are very similar, and they're web-based, have lots of resources. We used to have support groups for families in the area. They wax and wane on how available there are. But when I started training 40 years ago, that's one of the main things we did at our program was had a family support group.
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
just want to make one announcement too. Is Eva Copeland here somewhere?
Here.
Yeah, Eva runs a support group for widows and widowers.
Well, actually, for anyone that's lost a loved one.
Right. Grief share. So that's another resource we have at the parish here to help get through that very, very difficult time that goes on for years, perhaps, so see Eva for more information on that, someone.
And grief counseling is also part of hospice care while the person's alive and then after they pass away.
You all made a wonderful step by attending today, because you've come to learn, educate yourself on the best approaches to prepare for end of life. Like the Dr. Deacon and Ralph have touched on today, it's important to have those conversations before you think you need to have them. Everybody touched on a lot of things that our own family has experienced, because my mother passed away from Alzheimer's. But it was fortunate, big family, we had a family business. I got to work with my dad day in and day out, and we had the conversations. I tried to educate myself as much as possible. We had tough talks. And we did the funeral planning ahead of time while she was still where she could help make those decisions, and she had a part of it. So it was all set before she passed. And we ran across some of those, how do you take the car away, or how do you do this? And as the spouse, it's very difficult to handle that with your loved one that you spent all these years with. And my father was very stressed because she asked for her keys. She wanted to drive it. She did not belong in driving. And it was the younger generation, the fourth generation in the family business. He goes in there, he goes, "Hey, Pop." He goes, "Yes." He goes, "Doesn't Nana have," she called her Nana, "doesn't Nana have an Lexus?" And Lexus, he said, "Yes." He goes, "Oh, well, they had chips in the key. Let me take her key to Nedge's Lock and Key. They'll take the chip out. Well, it'll open the car, open the trunk and the glove box, but you can't start the car." And he said, "Pop, she's never going to tell you she can't start the car because she knows she shouldn't be driving." So off he went, got the chip out of it, made her happy because she held her key, and never told me. And she did. She got out in that car because my brother and his wife lived across the street. So she'd see her go into her car, sitting there for a little while, and then she'd get back out and go inside. So she was happy. It wasn't the stress on him, but it was those kind of conversations that make it very, very helpful. And a lot of us, with the dementia side of it, it's extremely stressful for the caretaker, even elderly care. It's extremely stressful for the person who's doing it. So if you can have those plans in place, it makes it a little easier for those. And we actually had to talk with my father when she reached the end where she really needed 24-hour care. He didn't want anybody in the house. They were okay there while he was at work, but nope, you better go home when I come home. So, and we went in one day and I said, "Dad," I said, "I've always wanted these decisions to be yours and Mom's." And I said, "But you need to make this decision, and if you don't make this decision, someone else is going to do that for you." He goes, "Who's going to do that for me?" I went, "Your children." I said, "Because your health is failing because of taking care of Mom." So he went and made the plans, and we always tried to help him do that. So by attending today, listening to the resources, the information, the last workshop we had here, my father invited us for was Wills and Trusts, the same thing, getting all that together. And I say it's never too early, because since I've seen you last, my co-worker had a dear friend, husband, picture perfect health, went snow skiing a couple weeks ago, walked every day, went out for his walk 2 weeks ago on a Thursday, never to come home. he dropped dead from his walk, on his walk. They, fortunately, had the plans put in place. So it's very important to do all that. It's very overwhelming. That's why you're taking these steps to help yourself get ready. I thank all of our speakers today. Ralph, Dr. Thornton. Yes, ma'am. Question?
I have a question. Is there a difference between regular hospice and are there Catholic hospices, so that you know how, they would hesitate to give you an injection, let's say, for passing sooner, that type of thing?
I'll stay for more questions individually, but to answer your question about Catholic hospice, I'm not aware of any in the area. That's where it'd be important to involve whatever chaplains or spiritual service that they talk about or coordinate with. I was fortunate with my father-in-law, had Angels of Mercy come in. Father Sebastian came to see my father-in-law, but it's more of a coordinated thing that I'm aware of.
I'm not aware of it.
Haven Hospice is promoted on the Queen of Peace website. So maybe you want to contact Father Esposito or someone at Queen of Peace and ask your question about how Catholic Haven Hospice is.
Okay.
Good research.
There's actually 3 major hospice in the community. It's Community Care Hospice, Vitas Hospice, and Haven Hospice. Haven Hospice provides more services to the family when they're under hospice care because they actually have a facility there on 39th Avenue where you go to actually, spend your final days. And then they also have a program where they provide care at home, and all 3 of them do that. And I would do research. I wouldn't take someone's just because they're recommended by Queen of Peace or anybody. I would research and find out what services they can provide for your family, and also at the best cost.
10 years ago, when my husband was dying, he was in the VA hospital, and then they transferred him into the VA hospice. At that time, they had a chaplain, but it wasn't a priest. The people were very compassionate and very caring. They were very nice with their veterans, And it wasn't until he wasn't eating or drinking, and I tried to put even ice chips by his lips, and he just wouldn't open his eyes, and just like it's automatically wouldn't accept it. He knew, I guess his body was shutting down. So towards the end, I had just gone home and was coming back, and I got a phone call from my daughter was there, and her best girlfriend was there saying he's going. And I just knew that the last thing to go was the hearing. And I said, put my phone up to his, and I told him it's okay for you to go, because I understand sometimes they struggle, but he just had oxygen at the end, but then after he went, my daughter told me, she said, Mom, he was really like gasping for air, and then they just gave him something so that he could have a peaceful death. I guess that's what you call it. I don't know exactly,
And we talk a lot.
It's confusing me.
Yeah, we talk a lot in the workshops that making your final plans is one of the greatest gifts you can leave your family, so they don't have to make those tough decisions. People, I think, Doc, you commented about, when it's happening, the people you think can handle it, a lot of times don't handle it. I had a sister that was a nurse, and nope, she couldn't handle it but that was her work job. This was her parent. So it is tough. But you're doing the right thing by learning the resources.
I'm just struggling with, we recognize death as natural death. I have a hard time with the thought of someone artificially feeding me and I'm suffering, I'm laying there suffering for years and years and years. To me, that's not a natural form. I couldn't get up and go to the refrigerator myself at that point. So it's kind of a fear of mine. If something horrible happened and I'm lying in a nursing home, you hear these stories of people laying there for 30 years. I don't want that to be my future, but it sounds like it's going to have to be. now that I've listened to what you said. I've even said to my husband, pull the plug, do whatever you have to do. And now I can't even ask him to do that.
I'll address that a little bit, if I may. So a lot of the rules and effort in here address persistent vegetative states. For those who are old enough, remember the Shivo case, and that is extremely rare. Exceptions sort of talk about the rule. And the change in that case had to do a lot with the personalities involved and not the clinical condition. Understand, none of us want to be in persistent vegetative state, but it overlaps with what we call medically assisted suicide, which then blends in to this euthanasia, because if you're in a persistent vegetative state, you can't take the overdose prescription to kill yourself. So that's the justification in Canada and Western Europe for the euthanasia, saying, oh, they'd want to be dead if they were like this, so we'll just kill them. And then it gets to be, well, they hadn't talked about it, but yeah, of course, no one wants to live like this, and so we'll kill them. And then it gets stretched about how that gets applied. And you'll hear about chronic pain, severe untractable pain, being an argument for medically assisted suicide. I wouldn't want to live in pain and suffer like that. That's not what drives, when you look at the data where people can do this in Canada, Western Europe, it's not pain, that's the driver for medically assisted suicide. The judgmental comment would be it's pride, but it's the loss of independence. I don't want to decrease function. I don't want to be dependent on other people. I don't want people to have to take care of me. Those type of things. And that gets more into our, I can't tell people they have to suffer, but, that's what it is.
So doctor, you can't
medically,
talk about the cross, yeah.
That's the cross.
So you can pull the plug because you're being artificially kept alive. So if you pull the plug.
Well, the plug is an artificial thing. You're not required to do an inordinate burden. So we imitate the lives of the saints. Is that fair?
That's fair.
So you look at John Paul the Great. He said enough after a while. He'd had multiple hospitalizations. He had a variety of things going on. He had pneumonia, and they were going to intubate him. He said no.
So then you die naturally.
He died, yeah.
It's not like you're ending your life.
Right. I can keep people alive, or me, the hospital. And we do this. We can keep people alive for months. Put you on dialysis. I can replace your liver. We can put you on ECMO to replace your heart and lungs. Maybe stimulate you occasionally, get a little blip on the brain wave. We can do that. But why?
Yeah, even the church would say extraordinary means are not required.
So what you're saying is you could turn the breaker off?
Pardon?
You could, yeah.
Turn it off, yeah. A lot of these things are to try to avoid putting your family in that situation. But, you can talk about it. Sometimes we know the person's essentially deceased, but we keep them on a ventilator and things so the family can come and arrive. And I think that's perfectly fine. But then someone has to make the decision to turn it off.
But if you're in a vegetative state and you're not being artificially kept alive and you just continue to be alive, then we know what medical science, what doctor says this person's not going to recover. We don't really see brain waves or whatever it might be, brain activity.
Well, persistent vegetative state, they have brain waves.
Okay. Well,
and part of the argument is there's case reports of people spontaneously waking up. I think there's one a couple years ago.
Remember the story of Lazarus?
Yeah, the Lazarus syndrome or something like that. So what they die from, like Deacon said, they don't die from persistent, you don't die from the coma, you die from, us trying to take care of people, but don't. So that aspiration, when you have that tube, if you get artificially fed, if you take a tube through your nose, you're likely to, regurgitate it and it gets into your lungs, you get pneumonia, you get sepsis. We can treat you with a bunch of antibiotics in ICU, maybe get you out a couple of times. We can go through that cycle 2 or 3 times, but it's not a benign procedure. Some people, apparently in the Shivo case, she apparently lived 10 years uneventfully, and it was the change in the marital desires of the spouse that led to the conflict. So that was why it's so tough. There wasn't a clinical change.
Got a question back here?
The only thing I don't think we've addressed is it's okay to die. It's okay to pass your love of God and your love of Jesus along. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, then my suffering gets offered to him. That is what I was taught as a young person.
Right.
I was not taught about all this other stuff. I was taught that the suffering that we experience at our end of life is to be offered up to God, and that would be a peaceful death. And I'll tell you from experience, and not just family members, I took care of my mom. I did homebound for 25 years at my former church, and I did a lot of end of life. We sat there, we prayed the rosary, we said specific prayers, and I was with these people and their families when they passed on. The priest was not available. So as a Eucharistic minister, I was given that privilege to be able to do that. And it is a beautiful thing. If you can separate your acute emotions from this earth to what's divine, I think that was probably the thing I learned the most of being able to do that.
Right.
And why I can't do it anymore here.
I've heard the phrase redemptive suffering, and that's an aspiration. I'd like to think I could do that, but I don't want to volunteer. I really can't tell other people they have to do that, but that's an aspirational act.
Well, I think Susan's thoughts here are a good time to pray this closing prayer.
Good, yeah.
You all have the bottom of their sheet. Oh, blessed Saint Joseph, you gave your last breath.
Love and embrace of Jesus and Mary. The seal of death shall close my life. Come with Jesus and Mary to aid me. Obtain for me the solace for that hour. Tie with their holy arms around me. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, I commend my soul, living and dying, into your sacred arms. Amen.
Thank you, Deacon. Father, thank you for having us back out. I appreciate it. And thank all of our speakers. Wonderful job. Thank you. And my card is in your folders if you ever have any questions or follow-up. Have a great day. Great seeing you.